Welcome back, students, to the next session of Basics of Mechanical Engineering. We'll be continuing our journey into the domain of thermodynamics. Today, what we'll be doing is that we'll be building upon concepts that we have already learned before. In the past few classes, we have talked about concepts such as enthalpy, internal energy, and also visited something called the first law of thermodynamics. So, we'll be building upon our concepts using these, what we have covered in the previous classes. So we already know that work is a path function. I just wanted to revisit this concept. So in the past few classes, we have also looked at something called PDV work or displacement work. A displacement work can be plotted on a PV plot. And we have looked at different types of processes. So for example, if you have got some process like this, and if it follows a curve which has a P into V is equal to constant sort of a process, we know that it is an isothermal process. And the corresponding work for isothermal work, or that is the isothermal work, can be expressed using the equation P1 V1 natural log of V2 by V1. Okay, and what this expression actually represents is nothing but the area under this curve. If we had a different curve, for example, say an isobaric process from say volume, we have initial conditions as 1, that is this 0.1 to say 0.2, where both the pressure and volume are defined. So now say we have got an isobaric process. We know that the work will be P into V2 minus V1. And in this case, just a second, I'll just switch the colors. So if you have got a line like this, we know that volumes are the same and the area will be something like this. So we know that even though that if they might have the same initial and final conditions, depending on the type of process, the area under the curve will be different. And this is a definite proof that work is a path function depending on the initial and final process. It's not just dependent on the initial and final condition, it is actually dependent on the path of the process. And we can use this property to basically confirm that heat transfer is also a path process. If we recall from the first law of thermodynamics, just one second, I'll just switch the colors again. Q minus W is equal to U, or so heat flow, total net amount of heat flow into the system minus the total energy, total work interaction is equal to the change in energy or internal energy of the system. So if we have a process in which the initial and final conditions are the same, or various processes in which the initial and final processes are the same. So this is from 1 to 2, and we have got say path A or process A and process B. Now we know that the initial and final conditions are the same. Thus, the initial internal energy and final internal energy are also going to remain the same, regardless of the process or path that is followed. This is because internal energy is a state function, it's not a path function. So regardless of the path taken, this internal energy term is going to remain constant. What varies is the work done and the heat transferred in the process. So for A, we know that QA minus WA is equal to change in internal energy, as well as QB for, now this is for B, QB minus WB is equal to the same in internal change in internal energy. Thus, for the same, for this, if mathematically, if you have to have the same internal energy change, what needs to change is also your amount of heat transferred in the process, if your work transfer is changing, to hold this difference constant. All right. So this is the definite proof that if work is a path function and internal energy is a point function or a state function, then heat transfer during a process is also a path function. Okay. Next, what we'll be looking at is another really interesting and important concept. This is something called, or regarding something called, thermal energy reservoir. To understand the concept of thermal energy reservoir, let's think of an ocean. You probably would have visited one in your lifetime. If not, wherever you are, think of a very large body of water. So in the picture, you can see a very large body of water. That's somewhere here. If there's a person by this body of water, maybe you, and you have a cup of really, really hot water, and you throw this cup of hot water into this large body of water, do you think that the temperature of this large body of water, the ocean, the river, whatever it may be, do you think the temperature is going to change? Obviously, no. The temperature of the large body of water does not change if you put a finite amount of heat or put in a finite amount of thermal energy into it, or even if you take away some of that thermal energy. Imagine if you dropped in an ice cube into that large body of water. I don't think that the temperature of the large body of water is going to change by much. Next, think about the sun. We receive solar radiation on a daily basis, and vast amounts of it. Regardless of the amount of heat that the sun throws out, its temperature does not change by much. Thermal energy reservoirs are such bodies which, if you add a finite amount of energy or take out a finite amount of thermal energy, its temperature does not change. All right. So what we can say is that a thermal energy reservoir is a body whose heat capacity is near infinity. All right. Thermal energy reservoirs are bodies whose heat capacity is near infinity. That is, if you put in a finite amount of energy or thermal energy, or take out a finite amount of thermal energy, their temperatures do not change. Their temperatures will remain constant. Okay. I hope this clears the concept of something called thermal energy reservoirs. This concept of thermal energy reservoir plays a very fundamental role in the field of thermodynamics. We use thermal energy reservoirs whenever we have to think of energy source or something called energy sinks. So we classify the thermal energy reservoirs into two categories, something called source and sink. So a thermal energy reservoir is called a source when you use it to extract finite amounts of thermal energy. For example, in our case, we can use the case of the sun. We use the sun, or we benefit from the existence of the sun on a daily basis. Our whole existence is dependent on that of the sun. All right. So we, on a daily basis, we take some amount of thermal energy, thermal energy from the sun, we convert it into whatever forms we want. Maybe it's wind, maybe it's rain, maybe it's on your solar panels, whatever it is. So we are using the sun as our thermal energy source. All right. So the sun is a thermal energy reservoir, which is defined as a source. Next, we'll be looking at the concept of a sink. So in our example, let's consider the same water body. If you pour in some amount of hot water, its temperature does not change appreciably. So a sink is a thermal energy reservoir which is used to uh, absorb waste amount of thermal energy. For example, if you have a engine, you have an engine, you have a bike engine, and it's running for a very, very long time. Obviously, its surface gets hot, and the fins which are located on it, they radiate heat into the atmosphere. They radiate heat into the atmosphere. Now, the atmosphere in this case can be considered as the thermal energy reservoir, and specifically, it can be considered as the sink, because we are putting in finite amount of thermal energy into the atmosphere, and the overall temperature of the atmosphere does not change appreciably because of this input of thermal energy. All right. So till regarding thermal energy reservoirs, we have looked at the definition of thermal energy reservoirs. We've looked at what types of thermal energy reservoirs that can be. That is, they can be as a source, or they can exist as a sink. Any thermal energy reservoir is characterized by only one single parameter, and that is its temperature. Okay. So the thermal energy reservoir, any thermal energy reservoir can be characterized only by its temperature. So that is the only distinguishing factor between one thermal energy reservoir and another. If you have got, say, the air at 30 degrees Celsius and water at 30 degrees Celsius, from a thermodynamic perspective, these both are the same thermal, or they have no difference between each other. All right. So both of them, since they have, that is, if air and water are at the same temperature, the large bodies of water, the surrounding air is at 30 degrees Celsius, and say the ocean is at 30 degrees Celsius, then both of them from a thermodynamic perspective are equivalent thermal energy reservoirs. There's no distinguishing factor between them. Okay. Next, we'll be looking at building upon this knowledge. In thermodynamics, we use heat engines. Now, heat engines are devices in thermodynamics which operate in a cycle. They draw in thermal energy from a thermal energy reservoir at, say, T1 at a higher temperature, and reject some amount of heat at T2, which is at a lower temperature, to a thermal energy reservoir, and they convert the difference in this thermal energy into useful work. So heat engines basically absorb heat from thermal energy reservoirs and convert it into useful work. Examples of heat engine can be petrol engines, diesel engines, jet engines. Then you have got power plants, which have your entire boiler and your turbine systems. So power generation units, etc. Now, please pay attention to the definition. Heat engines are thermodynamic devices which absorb thermal energy from a higher temperature, reject some of the thermal energy to a lower temperature, and convert the difference between the heat interaction between these two thermal energy reservoirs into useful work while operating in a cycle, in a thermodynamic cycle. All right. So for example, in a petrol engine, we use the Otto cycle. Okay. In the diesel engine, we use a diesel cycle. In a jet engine, we use the Brayton cycle. And in power generation, in thermal power generation units, this is thermal power generation units, we use something called the Rankine cycle. So we are operating in a cycle. So there is a working fluid which operates in a cycle. So it passes through different phases and ends up at the same original condition from a thermodynamic perspective. All right. So as I've mentioned, you can see that there's a thermal energy reservoir at T1. There's a thermal energy reservoir at T2. And what you're doing is that this is from a thermal energy reservoir at T1, you're absorbing Q1 of heat. You're rejecting Q2 of heat into the thermal energy reservoir at T2. And you're converting this difference, Q1 minus Q2, into useful work. Next, you may wonder, why is there some sort of heat rejection? So in thermodynamics, or from any thermodynamic perspective, there is no heat engine which is 100% efficient. So if any object or if any heat engine is operating in a cycle, it will always reject some amount of heat energy. And we'll look at this concept in further classes. So there is always some amount of rejection of heat from the heat engine. All right. This brings us to the really important concept of thermodynamic efficiency, which is represented by this symbol, which is pronounced as eta. So eta, so efficiency is defined as useful output divided by required input. So in this case, your useful output is W net and required input is Q1. We can simplify this equation as Q1 minus Q2 divided by Q1, or 1 minus Q2 divided by Q1. All right. There exists a special type of cycle called a Carnot cycle. Now these Carnot cycles are theoretical and they form the limiting factor in terms of thermodynamic efficiency. That is, there exists no engine which is more efficient than any Carnot engine operating between the same temperature limits. So if you have got two temperature limits, a higher temperature and a lower temperature, so the Carnot engines run on a Carnot cycle, and this Carnot cycle is an imaginary cycle, and between these two temperature limits, any two temperature limits, always the Carnot engine will have the highest efficiency. The efficiency of a Carnot engine can be given as efficiency is equal to 1 minus T2 upon T1. All right, where T2 and T1 are the temperature limits, or the temperatures of the respective thermal energy reservoirs as expressed in Kelvin. All right. So we can utilize this formula to get an idea of what the maximum efficiency of any thermodynamic cycle can be. So for example, if we take, just a second, if we take two temperature limits, one of say the surface temperature of the sun, which is T1 is equal to say 4000 Kelvin, and T2 as the temperature of the ambient air, that is 300 Kelvin. We can find that if there is a thermodynamic engine which is operating on the or a heat engine which is operating in a Carnot cycle between these two temperature limits, what the efficiency, maximum efficiency would be. So 1 minus 300 divided by 4000, and we get an efficiency of 92.5%. So even if you take an engine which is operating between the temperature limits of the sun and the ambient air, you do not hit 100% efficiency. All right. So efficiency can never be equal or greater than 100% in any heat engine. Next, we'll be looking at the concept of refrigerators. A refrigerator is a device which is used to cool a place or cool a system. All right. So the definition can be as follows. A refrigerator is a thermodynamic device which operates in a cycle which absorbs heat from a enclosed space at lower temperature and rejects it to the surroundings at a higher temperature. While consuming work. All right. So this is a device which operates in a cycle, consumes work, absorbs heat from an enclosed space at lower temperature, and rejects heat into the environment at a higher temperature. All right. And we can see that it takes in W amount of work and Q amount of heat and rejects a total of W plus Q amount of heat into the ambient surroundings. Okay. So these are refrigerators. Refrigerators are devices which are used to cool an enclosed space. All right. Similar to the concept of efficiency, for refrigerators, we have something called coefficient of performance, or COP. Even in this case, COP is defined as useful output divided by required input. Okay, so COP in this case, now what is the useful output, or what is the useful effect, output or effect? In this case is the absorption of heat from the enclosed space. In this problem, it is Q2. And what is the required input? That is W in. All right. We can rewrite this equation in terms of just the amount of heat that is rejected. That is, if we say Q1 is equal to W in plus Q2, we can rewrite W in as Q1 minus Q2. So we can rearrange this equation as Q2 is equal to, Q2 divided by Q1 minus Q2. All right. If we use something called a reverse Carnot cycle, again, this is again a theoretical cycle. So if you take a Carnot engine and you reverse its operation, what it's going to do is going to start absorbing heat from the lower thermal energy reservoir, and it's going to start dumping heat into the higher temperature or thermal energy reservoir. All right. And this is a reverse Carnot cycle. Again, it's an imaginary cycle. And for that, we have a Carnot efficiency. So COP Carnot, and that is equal to T2 divided by T1 minus T2, temperature measured in Kelvin. All right. So you have a Carnot, you've got your Carnot, the coefficient of performance for a Carnot cycle, and below that you will have the coefficient of performance for any other refrigeration cycle. All right. In day-to-day activities, in your home, in your office place, you don't use Carnot. Carnot obviously is a imaginary cycle. In day-to-day applications, we use something called, just a second, we use something called the vapor compression refrigeration system. All right. So this is the most popular type of refrigeration system, and this is that part. This is going to be that part which is operating in a cycle, and it's absorbing heat from an enclosed space at lower temperature while consuming work and rejecting the total amount of work plus heat absorbed into the higher temperature or the surroundings, or higher temperature reservoir or the surroundings. All right. Next, we look at something called as a heat pump. Now, if you look at the diagram for a refrigerator, schematic for a refrigerator, and if you look at the schematic for a heat pump, you'll notice that it is extremely similar. However, a heat pump is a device which is used to pump in heat into an object which is at a higher temperature than that of its surroundings. All right. For example, I'll give you an example of its application. So in cars, in the winter, okay, so this is a car, and in the winter, it's very cold. So what do you want to do? You want to warm this car up. All right. What would you do normally is that you would use an electrical heater, which is used to heat up the cabin space. All right. However, if you use a heat pump, what's going to do? It's going to take in heat from the surroundings while consuming work, and it's going to maintain this enclosed space at a higher temperature than that of the surroundings. So in a refrigerator, what you wanted to do is that you wanted to extract heat from your from the system. However, in the case of a heat pump, you want to deliver heat to the system. All right. So please understand the difference between a refrigerator and a heat pump. In the case of the refrigerator, our system is this, and in case of the heat pump, our system is this. All right. So it is that it is at a higher temperature rather than at the lower temperature, which is in the case of the refrigerators. All right. So again, you have COP for the heat pump, which is useful input divided by required output. Now, in this case, we are interested in the heat which is rejected by the heat pump to your enclosed space. So in that case, we will have Q1, that is, if you are considering W in plus Q2 is equal to Q1, all right, divided by required input, that is, again, you can rearrange this equation. So W in is equal to Q1 minus Q2. Q1 minus Q2. All right. So this is COP, coefficient of performance for a heat pump. Again, you can have, or we consider the limiting condition, that is, if the heat pump is operating in something called a Carnot cycle. So if it's operating on the maximum possible efficiency, or reverse Carnot cycle, I'm sorry, if it's operating at the maximum possible efficiency, you can say, that is that of the Carnot reverse Carnot cycle, then that limiting factor COP of the head pump for reverse Carnot can be expressed as in terms of the temperature. So T1 divided by T1 minus T2. So this is the limiting condition. That is the maximum possible value of coefficient of performance between any two temperature limits. All right. Now, based on all of these concepts that we have covered so far, what we are going to do in live sessions is that we are going to look at the applications of thermodynamics. We are going to look at different types of problems, and we are going to look at the different methods of solving these problems. All right. So I will see you in your live sessions. Till then, so long.